The only thing better than being able to decorate your home for fall on a budget with high-end decor is being able to decorate your home for fall on a budget with high-end decor you can use all year long. One of the things that I think you're really going to like about today's DIYs is that they're not just decor pieces that you can use for fall, but they're decor pieces that you can use in other seasons. I can't wait to show you, so let's get our DIY on.
I'm going to start with the commonly found basket. Okay, well, here she is. She was never really that ugly. It's just she was starting to look a bit worn. The paint was getting kind of yellowy, and I mean, the holly thing is great, but it's not really my style. So I decided that this would look nicer as an apple bushel basket. To give this little beauty a refresh, I just grabbed a paintbrush that had bristles that were the width of each of the weaving slats of the basket and some white chalk paint. And I just applied a couple of coats. I thought about spray painting this, but I wanted to keep the original wood color that was inside. I thought that the paintbrush would get in better in the parts where the weaving met. Didn't go heavy-handed with the paint on this basket and focused most of the paint and the layering for the part original painted image was, so that that would be completely covered up. Although it's a bit difficult to see in the video here, if you look closely, some of the paint had rubbed off of the original basket, and I wanted to keep that light wood popping through just a little bit to kind of give it that aged, worn look. Looked for some napkins that would have the motif that I was wanting, but unfortunately I wasn't able to find any. So instead, I took a sheet of white tissue paper and some printer paper, and then I cut slits on the corners of each of the tissue paper, and then carefully folded it up over the edge of the printer paper, and then using several pieces of tape, taped that down really well so that the tissue paper laid completely flat on the printer paper. Then, using one of my printables found in my At Jenny's Place printable library, I printed out the image onto the printer / tissue paper. And then once the image was printed out, just simply take a pair of scissors and cut away the printer paper from the tissue paper. And then once you have just the tissue paper, again using a pair of scissors, cut as close to the image as you can get so that there's just a little bit of the tissue paper around. And then you're just going to need some basic Mod Podge. I like the matte. You could use the shiny, but I think for this look the matte would work best. And then using a paintbrush, the same paintbrush I used to paint it, so I knew it would fit the wood slats. Paint on a nice thin layer of the Mod Podge to the section that the tissue paper will cover. Now once you lay this tissue paper down, you cannot move it again, so make sure that you get it exactly where you want it and that you carefully place it down. Do this bit by bit, so do the first layer of the tissue paper, smooth that out, then lift it back up, taking your paintbrush again, apply another thin layer of the Mod Podge onto the wicker basket, and then gently press the tissue paper back down onto that section, and then just keep continuing like that until you have the entire image adhered to the front of the basket. And then once you have your tissue paper lying down flat and it's slightly dry, go in with a little bit more of the Mod Podge and apply it to the surface. Using my Cricut scraper, I just gently pressed where the slats meet alongside the tissue paper so that I wouldn't rip it, but that it also would lay flatly to the surface. There you have it, the perfect apple bushel basket for fall. next DIY, I had to use a combination of thrift store and dollar store wooden spoons. Okay, well here are the 3 wooden spoons that I managed to find that were already used. The burnt one is the one that I started with. That would be mine. No judging. And then here are the ones that I found from the dollar store. And then grab your Art Minds antiquing wax, or any antiquing wax. I just happen to have a lot of Art Minds on hand. If there's one thing that all old wooden spoons have in common, it's that they have some sort of crack at the bottom of the spoon part. So to recreate this look with the dollar store ones, just grab a hammer and beat that spoon. Now this is going to be used to antique the wooden spoons that came from the dollar store. I wanted to go for different looks on each of the spoons, so some of them I applied the antiquing wax quite liberally, whereas some of the other spoons I just left as is, and a couple of them I just applied some wood oil. To make the spoons look a little bit older on some of them, I went in with a little bit of sandpaper and just scuffed them up a little bit more. Now, my hubby doesn't throw anything out, and that is very fortunate because scrap wood pile was a plank of tongue and groove that we had used way back when we first renovated our house, like way back. But it was going to be perfect for this project. So I just grabbed some Rust-Oleum chalk paint and a nice big fat chippy brush, and then going in with the dry brush and a little bit of the white chalk paint, I applied a very thin, worn looking coat of paint to the front of the board. A little treasure found in the wood pile were these old wood slats that came from a park bench that we used to have in our backyard. They were so old and grungy and chippy and perfect for the frame. So I just cut them down to size. Now I knew that when I put the frame together, 2 of the new freshly cut sides would be showing. And since the rest of it was really old and grungy looking, I wanted to make sure that the ends had a similar look. So to recreate this, you're just going to want to go in that hammer again and beat the ends of the wood pieces that are going to be showing. And with a little bit of antiquing wax and some folk art oatmeal chalk paint. And then using Kleenex, I just dabbed a little bit of each of the paints on, back and forth, until I kind of created a look of mossy, worn wood. When I was done, I had hubby look at both ends to determine which one was the old cut and which one was the new cut, and he couldn't even tell. Using the brad nailer, I put 3 nails into each end of the frame to hold it together. Next, I went in with a little bit of weld bond and a paintbrush, and I applied it to a thin strip of wood that we had in our wood stash, and I used the wood glue to adhere these long, thin pieces of wood to the inside of the frame so that I would have some place later on to attach the backing to. So in total, 4 strips of wood were attached to each end of the frame. And then these strips of wood with the weld bond was held into place with some clamps and then left to dry so that it adhered properly. The weld bond had dried completely. It was time to go in with a little bit more, this time on the top part of the thin strips of wood. Using the paintbrush, I just put a nice thick layer, but carefully, thinly, so I didn't get it on the frame on top, and then put the tongue and groove backing inside, pushing it down so that it laid flatly. Then I put a couple of big clamps on each end and added a few bricks and a few more clamps in the center to make sure that it didn't buckle and that everything laid flat. I left that overnight so that the weld bond could cure completely, and then I carefully arranged the wooden spoons on top of the frame, on top of the tongue and groove. Once I had the spoons spaced exactly how I wanted them, I went in with a little bit more of that weld bond and painted it on with the paintbrush, and then added a bit of hot glue. Hot glue will adhere the spoon to the tongue and groove really quickly, whereas the weld bond will take a little longer to dry, but will give you that long-term fix. And there you have it. I am simply in love with this fall decor. Really, like all the other projects, it's more than just fall decor. You could put this up and leave it up all year long. Dying to know what you think. Do you like it? Okay, for this thrifted fall decor DIY, I found this beautiful ceramic bowl, faux stone looking ceramic bowl at the thrift store. I loved its scalloped edges and simple monochromatic look, and I knew immediately I had to turn this into a candle. I added a couple of wick sticky dots to the bottom of my wicks and added that to the bottom of the candle, making sure that they were centered in line and not too close to each other or too close to the edge. To keep the candle wicks standing upright when I poured in the melted wax, I just used a pair of chopsticks that we always get when we order in Chinese food, and I keep them exactly for this purpose. To my double boiler, I added a bunch of my candle wax and started to melt it slowly. I am not an expert candle maker in any way, shape, or form. I'm really just a bit of a newbie. So if I can do this, you can do this. But basically, you want to melt your candle wax until it reaches around 190 degrees, and let the melted candle wax cool until it was around 175 degrees. And then I added my essential oils, stirring very carefully so not to add any air bubbles. And then I gently poured it into the ceramic bowl, and then hoping that it will work just fine. Oh no, it's cracked. Oh, it's completely cracked. I must have poured it too cold, or too hot, or too something. Oh, I'm gonna have to fix this. Okay, this is a good excuse to buy the heat gun I've always wanted, but in the meantime, if you're in a pinch, use your hairdryer. The hot air from the hairdryer will melt the wax and smooth out all those cracks and any indentations. And trim your wicks, et voila! For another simple fall DIY, I found this beautiful gray basket at the thrift store, and I knew it would match perfectly with the Dollar Tree pumpkins that I had just made over in the last video I put up. And I simply filled the basket full of those beautiful textured pumpkins, and that was it. That was all this thrifted fall DIY decor piece needed. This simple DIY, but I found this beautiful wooden bowl that had a really nice shape on the sides, and I just added 3 of my battery operated candles and then some pine cones inside, in and around the candles, and that's it. It's as simple as that. For $2 and a bunch of free pine cones, I had myself a beautiful fall decor piece.
Well, that's it for today's fall thrifted DIYs. I hope that you enjoyed those. If you did, make sure that you subscribe, give me a thumbs up. If you hit the notification bell, it tells you that the next time that I upload, and I'll see you next time.